All right, so unit 4, it's a quick unit. It's just 2 sections. So we're going to start with 4.1 with triangle congruence, and we are specifically going to look at side, 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 and side, angle, side. So before we can go into our specifics, we just need to talk about congruence and congruent figures. So in the figure here to the right, you see that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle FDE. Remember that this sign here, which is an equal sign with a tilde on the top, means congruent. So when you see that, that's what it means. So because we have this congruence statement, that's what we call this. It's saying one thing is congruent to another. The order of the vertices indicates the corresponding parts. So what that's saying is, because it's written ABC and then it's written as FDE, that gives us information as to what is congruent to what. So angle A is congruent to angle F, because if I look at my congruence statement, they're both first. B is congruent to D, because again, they're second in line. And then E is congruent to C because they're last in line. So the order that that statement is written gives us congruent parts. The same thing would be true with the sides. So AB is congruent to FD. Again, if I look at the order, AB is the first, FD is the first. BC is congruent to DE, and then AC is congruent to FE. So again, based off of this congruence statement here, that gives us a lot of information. So one of the things you might be asked to do is to take a look at a diagram, determine what parts are congruent, and then write a congruence statement. So let's start with the angles here. Okay, so I can see angle I is congruent to angle K because they both have one arc mark, right? Angle G is congruent to angle J because they both have 3. And then if I look at these angles in the middle, I know that those two are congruent because they each have 2 tick marks. However, I have to be specific. I can't just call them angle H because that could give us a lot of options. So I'm going to say angle IHG is congruent to angle KHJ. That's just using 3 letters because, again, we need to. Angle H is not specific enough. Okay, now if I look at sides, I'll do these in a different color. So the 1 tick mark is IG and JK, so we could say IG is congruent to JK. 2 tick marks would be GH, and that would be congruent to JH. And then 3 tick marks, we'd have IH, which is congruent to HK. And the order that we write those doesn't really matter. All right, so now that I have my congruent parts, I'm going to write a congruent statement. And so again, it's important that this congruent statement matches what we just wrote at the top, right? So if I say triangle IHG for the left triangle, I have to make sure when I write my second triangle, it matches. The easiest way to do that is to just look at each part. So we said angle I is congruent to angle K. That means K has to go first, right? From I went to H, so I went to the middle. So same thing, I'm going to go K to H and then to J. And if I double check, right, I matches K, G matches J, IH matches KH, everything in that statement checks out. Okay, so getting into these congruence postulates, these are really just shortcuts for us to find congruence. So instead of having to say all 3 sides and all 3 angles are congruent, this gives us a shortcut. So with side, 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 or we're just going to write SSS, that just tells us that if we know all 3 sides are congruent to all 3 sides of a second triangle, then we can say that the triangles are congruent. All right, so in this case, we see AB is congruent to DE, we see BC is congruent to EF, and AC is congruent to DF. So because of that, we know that ABC is congruent to DEF. So that's the first one. The second one we're going to look at is side angle side, or SAS. Again, another shortcut. So this, again, it's side, angle, side. The important thing is that it's the included angle, meaning it has to be the angle in between the two sides, right? So it's this angle here when I highlight those two sides that I'm looking at. So this is telling me AB is congruent to DE, the ones I have highlighted in green. AC is congruent to DF, the ones in blue, and those are, and then the included angle, right? So angle A and angle D are congruent. So because of that, we would know that those two triangles are congruent. Okay, so these we're just gonna look at, there's two here. We're gonna just determine, are they side, 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 or are they side, angle, side? So if I look at this first one, I have this side that matches this side. I have this side that matches this side. And then I have an angle and an angle. So this one would be side, angle, side. Again, the angle has to be in between the two, and it is. Next one, if I look at this side matches this side. Again, I can tell by the tick marks. This side matches this side. And the third side matches this third side. So since we have all three sides congruent, that would be side, side, side. Okay, so this is telling you that they are congruent. It's just making you choose whether it's side, 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 or side, angle, side. Okay, you might also see something like this that says, what additional parts do you need to prove the two triangles congruent by side, side, side? So it's giving me this side, right? If we look at this, they actually share this side. So that's what we call the reflexive property. And because it's the same, we know it's congruent to itself. So we can put two tick marks there. That's going to be our second side. So in order for these to be congruent, we would need ED, right, this third side, and FG, this third side, to match. So that's the additional part. So we could say we would need ED to be congruent to GF. And that would make this congruent by side, side, side. Okay, lastly, we're going to look at a couple that are going to say determine whether they're congruent. If yes, give me a reason and write a congruence statement. Okay, so three parts here. First, we say yes or no. Second, we write a reason, and our reason would either be side, 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 or side, angle, side, and then we write a congruence statement. Okay, so let's look at the parts that we have here. CB matches DF, so that's one side. AC matches EF, so that's another side, and then we have our angle, which is in between them. Okay, so we would say that yes, these are congruent by side, angle, side, right? We have the three parts that we need, and the angle's in the right place. Okay, so yes, they are. So if I say triangle ABC, remember, I have to make it match. So if I say A to B to C, that means this one would have to be EDF. Right? Because again, C and F match, they're in the same place. CB and DF match, they're in the same place. And AC and EF match, and they're in the same place in my congruence statement. Same thing here, just another example. Okay, so I have side and I have side. So that's part one. I have an angle and I have an angle. Okay, but nothing else is marked. So I only have two pieces of information. For both side, side, side and side, angle, side, we need three. And actually for all of our congruence postulates or shortcuts, we're going to use three pieces of information. So here we only have two. We can't assume that just because in the picture they look alike, we can't assume that they are the same. So we only have two things marked. That's all we know. So for this one, we just have to write no. Okay, and if we write no, we don't write a reason and we don't write a congruence statement. Okay, so that is it for 4.1. We'll do a couple more examples so you can get some more practice with deciding if angles are congruent. And then in 4.2, we'll see a couple other shortcuts.